The fork was halfway to my mouth when Wade started laughing. He leaned back in his chair the way he always did, arms folded, grinning at something on his phone. My stepmother, Donna, was cutting her chicken without looking up. The dining room smelled like pot roast and lemon cleaner. Thursday, ordinary in every way except for what came next. Made $300 today, Wade said. Sold some old junk from the garage. Medals, pins, some kind of display case. The collector guy wanted them. My fork left my hand. It hit the plate with a crack that made Donna flinch. What medals? I said, your dad's stuff. Just sitting in that box, collecting dust. My phone was on the table with the speaker active because I had been waiting on a work call. What came through instead stopped every sound in the room. This is the Department of Defense Asset Records Division. We are attempting to reach next of kin for Chief Daniel Mercer regarding his classified commendations. This is a matter requiring immediate attention. I looked at the phone. I looked at Wade. The color had left his face like someone pulled a drain plug. Donna set down her fork very slowly. Nobody said anything. The voice on the phone waited, and the entire weight of what my stepbrother had done began, right then, to land. I picked the phone up and told the caller who I was. His name was Officer Garrett. He worked in the DoD's Asset Tracking and Records Division, and his voice had the practice calm of someone trained to deliver bad news without escalating it. He asked if any of Chief Mercer's personal effects had been moved or transferred to another party in the last 24 hours. I said yes. Wade's jaw tightened across the table. Officer Garrett explained that several of my father's decorations were registered in a federal archive. Not unusual for high-ranking service members, he said, but these particular items had additional flags on them. Restricted designation. He used that phrase twice. Donna broke in. She said this had to be a mistake. She said my father had been gone for 3 years, and those medals had just been sitting in a box. Ma'am, Officer Garrett said, these items are not ordinary commendations. I asked him to explain. He said he couldn't do that over the phone, but he asked one more question before ending the call. He wanted to know if a specific medal, he described it only as a dark ribbon with a silver clasp, was among the items that had been sold. I didn't need to ask Wade. I already knew from the look on his face. It was. I knew which one he meant before Officer Garrett finished describing it. The display case in my father's study had held 11 medals. I had memorized every one of them as a kid, the way children memorize the things that make them proud of someone. Bronze Star, Navy Commendation, campaign ribbons going back 12 years of service, each one placed in a specific order that my father had arranged himself. The one on the far left, separated slightly from the others, was the one he never talked about. I was 10 years old when I asked him about it. He had sat down on the edge of my bed, looked at me for a moment, and said, "That one stays in its place. Don't ask about it. Don't point it out to anyone. If anything ever happens to me, that's the one you protect." I had nodded because he was my father, and I trusted everything he said. That medal was gone. Wade confirmed it when I pressed him. He said it got the highest offer. The collector had specifically asked about medals with unusual markings, and that one had a small engraving on the back that the man got excited about. When I relayed this to Officer Garrett before ending the call, his voice shifted. Whoever currently possesses that medal, he said, is in possession of restricted military property. Wade pulled out his phone under the table like I wouldn't notice. I told him to put it on the surface where I could see it. He did, which surprised me. Maybe the call had scared him more than he wanted to show. The screen showed a text thread with a contact saved only as a first name, Clive. The exchange was short. Wade had posted photos of the medals 2 days ago. Clive had responded with a specific interest in one of them. The conversation had a practiced feel to it, like Clive had done this before. He knew what questions to ask. He knew what he was looking at. I photographed the screen before Wade could object. Donna said I was overreacting. She said that the man was just a collector, and there was no reason to treat Wade like a criminal over something he hadn't known would matter. I asked her if she knew Wade had taken those medals. She didn't answer. The address in the thread was for a parking lot off a strip mall on the east side of town. Cash transaction. No receipt. No record. The man named Clive had not responded to any messages sent after the sale. My gut said this wasn't random. Collectors don't make same-day cash offers on military metals and then vanish. They negotiate. They verify. They leave records. This man had done none of those things. I sat in my father's study that night after everyone had gone to bed. The display case was still mounted on the wall. 10 medals remained. The bracket on the far left held nothing but a faint rectangular outline where the last one had rested for 3 years. I traced it with one finger. I was 12 when my father came back from his final deployment. He looked the same, but moved differently, more deliberate. Like every step was a decision. He sat with me on the porch the evening he returned, and he didn't say much. Just watched the yard until it got dark. But before he went inside, he turned to me. "I need you to remember something," he said. "If anything ever happens to me, protect that medal. Not because of what it represents, because of what's tied to it." I asked what was tied to it. "A mission that isn't in any public record," he said, "and it's better that way. But if it ever surfaces, the right people need to find it before the wrong ones do." He said it the way he said most things, quietly, like it was already settled. I had filed it away the way children file away things they don't fully understand. A warning without a shape. I understood its shape now. The two officials arrived at 8:15 the following morning. I had been up since 5. I heard the car in the driveway, a dark sedan, no markings, government plates. 2 men got out. Both wore suits that sat differently than regular suits do. Less like clothing, more like a decision. One was tall, with close-cropped gray at his temples. He introduced himself as Agent Reeves. The other was younger, square-jawed, and said nothing beyond his name, Agent Pruitt. They did not wait to be invited in. They moved through the front hallway with the controlled ease of people who had entered a lot of rooms uninvited and knew exactly how to do it without making anyone feel threatened. They asked to see the display case. They photographed it. They asked for the text thread. I gave them the photo I had taken the night before. Donna came downstairs in her robe and immediately began explaining that this was all a misunderstanding, that her son had not known the items had any special significance, that she hoped no one would overreact. Agent Reeves listened to her for approximately 6 seconds. Then he turned to me. "You're Chief Mercer's biological child?" "Yes," I said. "Then you're the person we need to speak with." He said it without looking at Donna. She went very still. Donna found her voice again by mid-morning. While Agent Reeves and Agent Pruitt spread documents across the kitchen table and ran through a series of questions, I answered as fully as I could. She stood in the doorway, cycling through reactions. First confusion, then defensiveness, then something that settled into blame. She said I had brought this into the house, that I had made a phone call I didn't need to make, that if I had stayed quiet and not escalated things, this could have been handled privately. I didn't respond to that. I kept my attention on Agent Reeves. He asked about my father's final months of service, whether he had received any unusual correspondence, whether any visitors had come to the house during his last leave. I answered what I could and said I didn't know what I didn't know. Donna interrupted twice more. Both times, Reeves waited for her to finish, then continued his sentence as if the interruption hadn't occurred. It wasn't rude. It was simply efficient. She had no place in what was being discussed. After the third time, Agent Pruitt closed the kitchen door. Donna was on the other side of it. Reeves looked at me. "Your father listed you specifically in his service file as the designated next of kin contact for matters of operational significance. I hadn't known that. Reeves asked if my father had left me anything. He meant officially. Paperwork, a storage unit key, a sealed envelope with a lawyer. I started to say no, and then I remembered the box. It was a metal lockbox, gunmetal gray, about the size of a thick hardcover book. My father had pressed it into my hands 2 weeks before he died. He was in the hospital by then, and his hands weren't steady anymore, but his eyes were. He told me to keep it somewhere Donna wouldn't look. He told me not to open it unless something happened that couldn't be explained. I had kept it under a loose floor panel in my closet for 3 years. I had not opened it. I told Agent Reeves I needed a few minutes. I went upstairs, pulled back the panel, and lifted out the box. The key was on a chain I had worn around my neck every day since my father gave it to me. It had become so ordinary, I sometimes forgot it was there. I brought the box downstairs and set it on the kitchen table. Reeves and Pruitt both went still when they saw it. "Did he tell you what was inside?" Reeves asked. "He said I'd know when it was time to open it." I said, "I put the key in the lock." Inside the box was a folder. It was sealed with packing tape pressed hard at every edge. On the front, in my father's handwriting, small, precise, the way he wrote everything, were the words, "If compromised." Reeves asked permission before he touched it. That surprised me. Inside the folder were 3 documents. The first was a set of coordinates printed on plain paper, with no header and no date. The second was a page of what looked like encrypted text, symbols mixed with numbers arranged in rows. The third was a handwritten note in my father's hand that said, "The metal is the key. If it's missing, the chip is already moving. Don't wait." I read that line twice. Reeves and Pruitt exchanged a look. What operation was my father part of? I asked. Reeves folded his hands on the table. He said that what my father had been involved in was a covert maritime interdiction mission that had never been publicly acknowledged. It had taken place nearly 9 years ago in international waters. The outcome had prevented a significant transfer of weapons-grade technology to a hostile network. My father had been the lead operator. The medal wasn't awarded for heroism in the traditional sense. It was tied directly to that mission and to whatever was hidden inside it. Wade came downstairs around noon. He had changed clothes, which told me he had been awake for a while and had taken time to prepare himself. He walked into the kitchen with the careful energy of someone who had decided to act like things were normal until someone told him they weren't. Agent Reeves told him they weren't. They walked him through what had happened: the restricted designation, the Federal Archive flag, the potential consequences of transferring classified military property without authorization, even unknowingly. Wade's face went through several expressions quickly: disbelief, calculation, and then the one I had been waiting for, fear. For the first time since any of this started, he was genuinely scared. He said he hadn't known. He said the man seemed like a regular collector. He said it was just a box of old things sitting in a garage, and no one had ever said they mattered. And then, because this was Wade, the fear lasted about 90 seconds before it became something else. He turned to me. "You knew those were important," he said. "You never told me. You kept all your dad's things locked up and never explained anything. If anyone created this situation..." Agent Pruitt cut him off. "We'll get to that," Pruitt said. "First, what else have you taken from this house?" The answer came out slowly, not because Wade confessed willingly, because Agent Pruitt had a way of asking follow-up questions that made silence feel worse than talking. Within 20 minutes, a clearer picture had formed. Wade had been going through my father's things for at least 3 weeks before the sale. He had started in the garage. Storage boxes, old duffel bags, equipment cases. Then he moved to study. He told Pruitt he was just looking for anything worth selling because money had been tight. That was the word he used. Looking. Like it was casual. Like searching a dead man's belongings while his widow watched television in the next room was something that just happened. But I knew Wade. He hadn't stumbled across those medals. He had gone looking for something specific, or at least something he had been told would be valuable. I asked him directly, "Who told you there was something worth money in my dad's things?" He said nobody. He said he found the medals on his own. I didn't believe him. The story was too clean. The buyer had been too specific. A cash transaction in a parking lot, no record, immediate interest in one particular medal with unusual markings. Someone had pointed Wade in a direction, and Wade, being Wade, had followed it without asking why. Agent Pruitt made a call. He stepped into the hallway and spoke quietly for about 4 minutes. When he came back, he asked Wade for his phone. Not requested. Asked in a way that communicated the alternative was worse. Wade handed it over. They went through his call history with a number search program Pruitt ran through a small tablet. Most numbers were familiar. Donna's, a few friends, a delivery service. But one number appeared 3 times in the 2 weeks before the sale. An unlisted number with no carrier registration, routed through a prepaid account. Reeves looked up from the tablet. That number is associated with a network we have been monitoring for 14 months, he said. They deal in stolen military artifacts, decorations, equipment, documents, primarily sourced from the estates of deceased service members. Donna had drifted back into the kitchen doorway. I heard her draw in a sharp breath. They target families, Reeves continued, usually someone on the inside, someone with access who can be convinced that what they're looking at has resale value. He wasn't accusing Wade with his tone. He didn't need to. The facts were already doing that. Wade stared at the table. His jaw moved like he was searching for a sentence that would help him. He didn't find one. I thought about how easy it would have been to feel sorry for him. Wade hadn't understood what he was really selling. He hadn't known that Clive was a middleman for something organized and deliberate. In a different version of this, he was just a young man who got used by people who were far better at it than he was. But the other version was also true. He had gone into my father's study without asking. He had searched through things that were not his. He had found the metals, recognized their potential value, and sold them to a cash buyer without telling anyone, not me, not even Donna, because he knew that if he told us, we would say no. He had chosen money over a dead man's dignity, and he had chosen it knowing exactly whose things those were. That wasn't manipulation. That was a decision. Agent Reeves said the network that had approached Wade typically moved items quickly across multiple hands. The metal would not stay with Clive for long. Each transfer made recovery harder. The encrypted information inside it, whatever it was, would eventually reach someone who understood its full value. Can you still find it? I asked. Reeves said there was a reason they had come in person rather than simply made another phone call. We think we can, he said, but we need to move now. Reeves set a photograph on the table. It was a close-up of the back of my father's medal. I recognized the shape of it immediately, the dark ribbon, the silver clasp, the slight imperfection at the lower right edge where the metal had been pressed slightly off-center. I had looked at it hundreds of times through the glass of the display case, but I had never seen what Reeves was pointing to. Along the inner edge of the clasp, barely visible without magnification, was a pattern of micro-engraved characters. The photograph had been taken with a macro lens. The marks were smaller than the period at the end of the sentence. That is a micro-identifier, Reeves said. It is linked to a classified tracking system developed specifically for high-risk field assets. Not standard issue. Applied to this metal by personal request of the commanding officer on your father's mission. I asked what that meant practically. It means that as long as the metal has not been physically altered, Reeves said, we know approximately where it is at any given time. He turned the tablet toward me. On the screen was a mapping interface with a single blue dot. It was not moving. It was positioned outside the city, near what appeared to be a commercial district. It has been in that location for 6 hours, he said. I was already reaching for my jacket. Agent Reeves said my name once, quietly. I stopped. He explained the protocol. A recovery operation involving restricted military property had to be conducted under coordinated authority. He and Pruitt could not simply drive to a location and retrieve an item without proper backup and documentation. There were procedures, chain of custody, legal standing. I understood all of that. I also understood that the dot on the screen had not moved in 6 hours and could move at any moment. I told him I understood the protocol. I also told him that the only reason those officials were sitting in my kitchen with that file and that photograph was because I had kept a lockbox hidden under my floor panel for 3 years without opening it. My father had trusted me with something he hadn't trusted anyone else. That counted for something. Reeves looked at me for a long moment. You want to be present for the retrieval, he said. It wasn't a question, but I answered it anyway. Yes. He and Pruitt exchanged a look, not the calculating kind. Something more like recognition, like they had seen this before and knew, when arguing was a waste of time. You ride with us, Reeves said. You stay in the vehicle until we clear the location. If that changes, you follow every instruction immediately. Understood. Understood, I said. The warehouse was on the edge of an industrial park off Route 7. It looked like nothing from the outside. Gray corrugated siding, a roll-up door, a parking lot with 3 vehicles and no signage. The kind of building designed to be overlooked. We arrived at 3:40 in the afternoon with 2 additional federal vehicles that had joined us on the highway. I stayed in the car as promised. The entry team went in at 3:44. I watched through the windshield. The door opened without resistance, which Pruitt later said was its own kind of bad sign. Easy entry usually meant the occupants had already gone. They were right. The warehouse was not empty. Inside, as Reeves described to me afterward, were rows of shelving units holding dozens of items. Military equipment, framed certificates, decorations in plastic sleeves, service weapons with serial numbers filed down. A museum of stolen things. Every item in that building had come from a family somewhere who didn't know it was gone. But my father's medal was not among them. Reeves came out and stood beside the vehicle. He didn't look at me right away. He looked at his tablet first, then at me. It moved, he said, approximately 4 hours ago. The signal went mobile. My chest felt hollow. Where? I asked. Back at the house, the mood had shifted. Donna was in the living room with her arms crossed and her phone in her hand. Wade was sitting at the kitchen table, and I could tell from his posture that something had happened while I was gone. Reeves must have noticed it too, because he went straight to Wade before even taking off his jacket. A second tablet connected to a federal document system showed what Pruitt had retrieved from the network's communication logs during the 2 hours we had been out. Messages routed through the same prepaid number. Photographs attached. Wade had sent them. Not during the sale. Before it. 3 days before the meeting with Clive, Wade had photographed every item in the display case and sent those images to the prepaid number. 8 clear photographs, each one showing metal positions, ribbon colors, and visible markings. He hadn't just sold them. He had advertised them. He had provided documentation that let the network identify exactly which item to prioritize before any transaction even took place. Reeves asked Wade if he understood what he was looking at. Wade said he had only been trying to get a better price. I heard myself let out a slow breath. Not because I was calm, because I was trying to be. You knew what you were doing, I said. You just didn't know how far it would go. I had kept it together through 2 days of officials and documents and protocol. I answered every question calmly. I had provided the lockbox and the key and every piece of information I had. I had ridden in that government sedan to a warehouse and waited in the car like I was told. I had done everything right. But standing in that kitchen, looking at photographs my stepbrother had sent to a black market network, photographs of my dead father's medals, taken in the house my father had paid for, on a shelf my father had built with his own hands, something in me stopped being managed. I turned to Wade. I told him what those medals had meant to my father. I told him about the last leave before his final deployment, when my father had straightened each one in the display case like it was a ritual. I told him about the night my father died and how I had gone into that study alone and stood in front of those medals for a long time because it was the closest thing I had left to him. I told him he hadn't sold old metal. He had sold the only physical record left of who my father was. Wade said he was sorry. He said it to the table. Donna said I was being dramatic. Nobody in that room believed either of them. They came for Wade at 7 the next morning. Not dramatically. No flashing lights, no uniforms. 2 agents in plain clothes knocked on the front door while I was making coffee. Reeves was one of them. He had paperwork. He explained to Wade in precise and careful language that he was being detained for questioning regarding the unauthorized transfer of restricted military property and his documented communication with a known artifact trafficking network. Wade looked at me across the hallway. I looked back. Donna made a sound that started as a protest and became something smaller and sadder on its way out. She followed them to the door, demanding explanations, asking if he needed a lawyer, saying this was a misunderstanding that had gone too far. Reeves gave her the name of a federal public defender office and a case reference number. They put Wade in the back seat of the sedan the same way everything else had happened over the last 2 days, efficiently and without drama. Donna stood on the porch after the car left. Her arms were crossed. She was staring at the empty street. I brought her a glass of water and set it on the railing beside her. She didn't look at me. She didn't say thank you. But she also, for the first time since any of this started, didn't say he was innocent. The signal had gone cold for 18 hours. I was at the kitchen table at 11 that night when Reeves called. He said it had reappeared. Not in the city, not even in the state. The tracking signal had pinged from an international cargo processing hub 200 miles east, a shipping facility that handled outbound freight routed to overseas destinations. He said it plainly. The metal is inside a package scheduled for international shipment. If it leaves the country, jurisdictional recovery becomes significantly more complicated. How long before it ships? I asked. The package is on a flight manifest departing at 6:40 a.m., he said. We have a 7-hour window to intercept through the cargo authorities' cooperation. I asked if they could make that happen. Federal authorization is already in motion, he said. Customs coordination is underway. We expect to flag and hold the shipment. He paused. I want you to know we are treating this as a priority case. Not just because of the tracking technology. Your father's service record is part of why this network specifically targeted your household. They knew exactly what they were looking for. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, get it back. That's the plan, he said. Reeves called again at 5:52 a.m. I hadn't slept. I was still at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and the folder for my father's lockbox open in front of me. I had read the handwritten note probably 12 times. The metal is the key. If it's missing, the chip is already moving. We have it, Reeves said. I closed my eyes for 1 second. The cargo had been flagged at the shipping hub's pre-departure screening station. Federal Customs agents had pulled the package, listed on the flight manifest as a collection of antique decorative pieces bound for an address in Eastern Europe. The physical inspection had found 17 items packed in foam and sawdust. My father's metal had been wrapped separately inside a brass ornamental box that had probably been chosen because it looked like just another antique among the rest. But that was not the most significant part of what Reeves told me next. When the customs agent examined the metal with a detection wand on routine protocol, it triggered a secondary alert. Not for the tracking signal, for something else. Something embedded in the clasp itself that the scanner had picked up as a dense, layered anomaly. The metal had weight that wasn't just metal. There's something inside the casing, Reeves said. We're opening it now. The call came back 40 minutes later. Reeves's voice had changed. Not alarmed. Be more careful. The way people speak when they have just confirmed something significant and are still deciding how much to say at once. Inside the clasp of my father's metal, sealed within a microcavity in the base metal, was a data chip, the size of a thumbnail, encased in a resin compound that had been designed to prevent detection by standard scanners. It had been there for 9 years. My father had known it was there the entire time. He had carried it through his final years of service, through his retirement, through his illness, with that chip sealed inside a piece of metal hanging on his study wall. And he had told me to protect it, not because he thought I would understand what it was, because he knew that when the time came, I would do what he asked without hesitation. Reeves said the chip contained operational documents from the covert maritime mission. Coordinates, communications logs, and identity files of individuals connected to the weapons technology transfer network. Information preserved specifically because there had been serious concern at the time that official channels might be compromised. My father hadn't just participated in that mission. He had been protecting its record ever since the day it ended. That was why they had come for the metal. That was why he told me to guard it. Reeves came to the house one final time 3 days later. He sat across from me at the same kitchen table where all of this had started and explained what his division had been able to confirm once the chip's contents were fully analyzed. He spoke with more openness than before. Not everything, there were things he said were still classified and would remain so, but enough. My father's mission had disrupted a planned transfer of guidance system technology to a network that had been attempting to develop it for offensive use. The operation had been conducted without official acknowledgement to protect the operatives involved and the intelligence methods that had been used. For 9 years, that complete record had existed only on a chip inside a medal on a wall. If that chip had left the country, Reeves said, the individuals named in those files would have been in danger, and the network would have known precisely which intelligence methods to avoid going forward. My father had understood all of this. He had carried that weight through retirement and illness and death. He had pressed a lockbox into my hands in a hospital room and trusted me with a responsibility he couldn't explain in full. He had given me the key to a box that held instructions for a situation he hoped would never come. He had trusted me to hold the line if it did. I asked quietly when I could have the medal back. Reeves said soon. Wade's case moved through federal processing over the following weeks. I wasn't involved in the legal proceedings. Reeves kept me updated in broad terms. The charges were not minor: unauthorized transfer of restricted military property, knowing communication with a federally monitored trafficking network. His cooperation with investigators would factor into the outcome, but the cooperation itself had limits. He had sent those photographs. He had made those calls. Those things were on record and would not disappear. He was not going to prison. Reeves said that plainly when I asked. The federal system in cases like this was more interested in dismantling the network than in punishing the edge-level participants who had been used as entry points. But the consequences were real. A federal charge on his record. Substantial fines. A legal process that would follow him for years. I didn't feel satisfied when I heard that. I felt something quieter. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But an absence of the burning that had been sitting in my chest since the night the fork hit the plate. Donna called me once during that period. She said she knew things had gotten out of hand. She said she wished it had gone differently. She didn't say she was wrong. She didn't say Wade was wrong. But she had stopped saying everyone else was to blame. That was the most honest she had been in 3 years. I told her I appreciated the call and hung up. The ceremony was small. A conference room in a federal building downtown. Reeves was there and Pruitt and 2 officials I hadn't met before. One of them was in full dress uniform. He introduced himself as Captain Doyle. He had served in the same naval command as my father 20 years ago, long before the covert mission, before any of this. He held the medal in both hands when he presented it to me. Chief Mercer was one of the most methodical operators I have known in 30 years of service, he said. He did not do things without purpose. The fact that that chip survived 9 years intact because he placed it in the right hands tells you everything about his judgment. I took the medal. It was lighter than I expected. Or maybe I had been carrying its weight so long that it had become ordinary. Captain Doyle looked at me and said, "Your father trusted you for a reason." I didn't say anything right away. I looked at the medal in my hands, the dark ribbon, the silver clasp, the faint micro-engravings I could barely see, and I thought about my father sitting on the edge of my bed when I was 10 years old, telling me quietly to protect it. No drama. No explanation I could fully understand. Just a man who knew what was coming and chose the one person he believed would still be standing when it arrived. He had been right, and this time, no one will ever take that from me again.